Hi, this is Olof from Eperoto. I'm back now with our third and concluding video on decision analysis in law and in our software. If you haven't already watched the first two videos, that would be helpful before watching this one. For those of you who already have, let me start by briefly recapping the key messages of the first two videos. We started off by analyzing a single claim in the tool, and after that we moved forward and analyzed a group of claims individually, and then moved on to analyze them by picturing ourselves as the trier of fact, the arbitration tribunal in this case. And now let me turn it back over to John to tell us where we're going next.
Thank you, Olaf. As you've seen, making the best use of decision analysis in your legal practice is a continuing process, just like becoming a better attorney is. We all know the value of an attorney with decades of experience. I'm still learning more about decision analysis and how best to apply it even now, 40 years after I started. In decision analysis, understanding is built in stages. In the basis development phase, we develop the alternatives, information, probability assessments, a risk tolerance, and a discount rate. In cases where we have a complex value model, which is needed in legal cases when you have complex intellectual property or patent litigation or long time horizons, there's a step that we do called deterministic structuring that gives us a ranking of the uncertainties and where we identify the most important uncertainties. If you have a very simple value model, you don't need to do this, but when the model is more complicated, we do deterministic sensitivity analysis in the deterministic structuring stage. That feeds into probabilistic evaluation, where you get the value and risk of the alternatives, and you get this in the Eperoto software by looking at the distribution on value. That goes into basis appraisal, where you get a recommendation and a rationale for it, but the whole process is iterative. At each part, you're looking at all the pieces and asking yourself those questions. Have I missed something? Does this make sense? Can I explain simply to someone what I propose to do and why? And if they ask me questions about that, you have all the particulars of your analysis as backup for how you got there and why you think that. Now, just reviewing what we came up with in the last video, here's how we thought how the evidence was going might drive our case. And we expressed that in terms of conditional probabilities. So the odds for getting paid for additional work are conditional on how the evidence is going, and so is the outcome for how much you might get paid conditional on how the evidence is going. These are what's called conditional probability distributions. And here's the rub. Conditional or dependent probability distributions are almost always present, almost always critical when present, and people almost always miss them. They are key for improving your client's prospects. Quantifying the uncertainty doesn't eliminate it, but you can shift the odds in your client's favor. Use your understanding to drive better litigation and settlement strategy. Trade away things which don't matter or are less important to your client. Go hard on the things that are important. Plan and execute strategic moves to drive the odds in your favor. Now, let's think a little harder about our client's claims for the Stuttgart airport. We've already identified that, in this case, a key question is how the presentation of evidence to the trier of fact might go. Of course, this is just an example, and the specific issues tend to vary with the case, which is why it's important to think hard about what is going on in your case. But for Stuttgart, if how the claims look is so important, maybe it's important to think about the claims themselves. Which ones do we have the strongest evidence for, and which ones have the weakest evidence? Maybe we should drop the weaker ones because they make the strong ones look bad and weaken our chances of success on them. In my books, I call this spillover. Issues that are not formally connected in a legal sense tend to influence how the trier of fact views them. It's a very real effect, even when the case is tried before a judge and not a jury. Let's say we discuss this with the client and they agree. They would prefer to proceed with the claims that have strong chances of success rather than weakening them all with the problematic claims. We then work with the client to sort those with not so good evidence. Then, for now and pending further data and developments, we put aside the weaker claims. What would our probability assessments look like? Let's build it up, piece by piece. So we're going to apply this and change the prospects by changing the case. So we've dropped the weaker claims for the case. Our questions haven't changed. We still have the questions of how is the evidence going, will we get paid for additional work, and how much will we get paid? But the answers are a little bit different now. Maybe we need to think in terms of them going great, going good, and going not well, knowing that not well is a more remote scenario. And maybe we think it's like a 35% chance that things will go great, 55% chance that they'll good, and only 10% chance that they could go not well. We still have the same answers to the questions of getting paid for additional work. It's going to be a yes or no, but the odds are going to be different. So if the evidence is going great, maybe there's up to a 95% chance that we get paid. If it's going good, still 80%, which is really good. And if it's going not well, 40% versus the 60% that we get paid nothing. Now, if we're paid for additional work and the evidence went great, we have the greatest potential recovery, and maybe that's 9 to 6.5 million. Still high, but a little bit less than what it was, because remember, we've dropped the weaker claims. If the evidence is only going good, well, maybe we get awarded a little bit less than that because they don't award us on all the claims, and maybe the range is only 8 to about 4.5 million. And on the low end, maybe it's 4 to about 1 million. So you see what we've done here is we have drastically shifted what the odds are by looking at our case and dropping the weaker claims. So we were able to change the probabilities to make them much more in our client's favor for what they should recover. And even though the amounts are slightly less because we dropped some claims, it should come out in the math that the value of the case is higher. And if not, we need to go back to our model. And now Olaf will show us how to put this into software and compare the analysis with our two simpler versions.
All right. What we do now is once again create a copy of this last version. We deem that removing these claims will increase our chances of the evidence going our way from 15 to 35%. Also, we set the chances of mixed to only 55%. The odds of the evidence going against us has now been reduced to 10%. If things go our way, we would also increase our chances of winning at least one claim to 95%, so just a 5% increase. Next, we look at the chances of winning the full amount. Previously, we claimed 11.6 million, but with the removal of the weaker claims, the full amount is now 10 million. We adjust the high, medium, and average scenario also. Next, we move to the prognosis for the scenario where the evidence is very mixed. Now, with the weak claims removed, we increase the chances of winning at least one claim by 5% and also adjust the amount we could win now that we have removed the weaker claims. Finally, we go to the going against us scenario and increase the probability here by 5% and the amount, the quantum, accordingly. Now we have completely removed several of the claims totaling 1.6 million. The full claim amount is now 10 million. This has also slightly increased our chances of being successful with presenting our case and the evidence, which leads to a moderate increase in the strength of the claims. Despite having removed these claims, the value of the case has now increased. It wouldn't be strange to assume that the removal of these claims would result in lower legal costs for both parties in the proceedings. We go to the Legal Costs tab and reduce the legal cost projections by 200,000 per party. As the costs and potential downside is now reduced, the value of the case has increased even further to almost 6 million.
As we've seen, the purpose of using decision analysis is not to replace anything you've learned as an attorney, but rather to build on it to help you become even more effective and to plan and execute your case strategy. Here's how to use decision analysis with your client. Use the analysis and your insight from it to come up with a brief, few sentences explanation of what is best to do and why. When the client asks questions, you have your detailed analysis and inputs to explain. Most clients will love this. They'll feel more in control. They understand the risks and that there may be an unfortunate outcome which is not your fault or their fault. They appreciate that you are taking their time, money, and risk very seriously. Hint, hint, hint. Most clients are far more receptive to subjective probability than most attorneys. They understand that there are risks and that getting better at dealing with them is important. Thank you for joining us on this little intellectual journey. We hope it helps you get started on getting the most out of your law practice and for your clients.
As you can see, there can be different ways to model the same dispute. The most important part is that the way of thinking makes sense for you and the case at hand. Many times, it's a good idea to start as simple as possible and then increase the complexity later on as needed. Thank you for watching these videos. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if you want to discuss how to best model your case.